Hello and welcome to It's About Youth. I'm your host, Fana Sheh. Now, non-Malays only or no Indians, that's the phrase that too many young Malaysians still hear when trying to rent at homes. Now, today we're talking about racial discrimination in the rental market, how it affects youth, why it persists, and what can be done to change it. Joining me are two guests, Kusaaliny Mahendran, PJ City Councilwoman and co-founder of SOCDEM Malaysia, as well as Jason Wee, Executive Director of Architects of Diversity. Thank you so much for joining me, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we want to talk about the root causes, or let's paint a landscape first of what's going on here in the rental market, especially those that are affecting youths, right? Can you share some common, the phrases just now, right, that I use, can you share some of the common forms of racial discrimination renters, especially young ones, experience in Malaysia? Let's start with you, Kusha.
Well, so our office, when we conduct service night, have received like many complaints from many students trying to rent, saying that there's a few stages of discrimination that happens. So stage one is you inquire, is this room like available for viewing, and then that's the first line of racial discrimination, because the first thing you get is like a profile thing to fill up, name, age, race is always like number 3 or number 4 on the thing, and then there's like, what do you do? Are you a student? Are you working? Where are you working? So there's like a huge form to fill up, and after that point, once people fill up the form truthfully, most of the time they are frozen. There's no more reply from the agents because it doesn't fit the criteria, or they're trying to find their landlord a perfect tenant who is the right skin color or something that the landlords prefer. And then there's a second stage of discrimination where even if the viewing happens and let's say there's 3 people who's interested in the room, the person who may not get it may be the Indian people, and instead of the Chinese person in the room or the Malay person in the room. So it happens at several stages, and this also means that there's no equitable access to housing for people in the city, in the Klang Valley. Not just in the Klang Valley, but maybe even in Penang and other places around the country.
Yeah, so maybe, I guess, just to add, right, in terms of demography, obviously the primary group that's impacted, and this is shown by both testimonials we've received as well as surveys we've conducted, right, is that the most common this form of discrimination is no Indians in racial ads, and this is especially true in exactly what Kusha mentioned, in rooms, especially lower value units. But also, if you also look at different smaller towns outside of the Klang Valley, right? Sometimes you will also encounter Malay Muslim only units where even Chinese individuals living in smaller Malay majority towns might face difficulties in getting units. But I think the most prevalent one is that we found is Chinese only, especially given the the legacy of cities where in colonial times the majority of property owners in Malaysia in cities are primarily Chinese Malaysians, right? And so who are the landlords in this case? And oftentimes the ads we see is either Chinese only or no Indians, and this is really like one of the main concerns in primarily city centers in Klang Valley.
Right. So I guess that draws me to my next question, which is how widespread it is. So is it primarily focused in Klang Valley, or does it happen anywhere else as well? Is it primarily just mostly rooms that are youth, mostly youth that are attracting to it, or is it other houses or other kind of units? Do you mind painting a bit more of it? And also, why does it happen? So what keeps it alive here in Malaysia, this form of racial discrimination?
Yeah, maybe I'll add and then I'll pass it to Kusha. So I think first, we don't have good numbers on this just because we don't have a centralized database of rentals. But based on the numbers that we do have, we know that at least racially, around 2 in 5 Indian Malaysians experience rental discrimination, right? And 1 in 10 for non-Indian citizens generally. And you're right that, at least based on our data, the rate of problems or discrimination in Klang Valley and city centers are higher because more people rent in city centers anyway. I mean, city centers, especially the Klang Valley, are places where people from outside of Malaysia, outside of, in smaller towns, move for economic and job opportunities, right? Hence, needing that place for housing. And so it is by nature an issue with for individuals who don't have capital locally, but more importantly also people who are starting off at an economically more disadvantaged position.
Yeah. So a large demographic is youth, right, Kusha?
Yes, I agree. I think it's youth. So let's just paint a picture. I'm also from Ipoh, so when I came to KL, to study in Sungai Long, I also needed to look for rooms to rent. And so It didn't happen to me as much, but it still definitely did. You know, like
Yeah,
out of 10 people that you text, maybe like 7 people freeze you out, but still at least thank God 3 people texted me back so that, you know, I got my first like room thing sorted. But it was definitely something that was apparent. And because I was in Utah and I'm surrounded by, you know, my Chinese friends who I love and who have helped me, you know, in the future and even now, like the rental units that I have, sometimes I get them to help me to text the agents so that, you know, they cannot say the room's not available. So once they said like, okay, you can come for the viewing on the 19th, then suddenly I show up with my Chinese friend, and then it's available for viewing compared to like if I texted by myself. So these are like personal experience that I've experienced, but I know that it's not an isolated incident. And when I speak to other people in my community of, you know, the same brown skin color, they face the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the news, and there's Facebook groups, you know, tackling this issue as well. So it's not anything new, and it has been happening for quite some time as well.
Yeah, and I think there was a news piece, right, where Kadazan man from Sabah was looking for a room, and this conversation he posted on Twitter, I think, was that they asked for his race, and he said Kadazan, and the agent actually replied, "Oh, sorry, we only want locals," thinking that the agent not knowing that Kadazan is a race in Malaysia. And I think that really goes to show the level of ignorance and the really property bubble that we see not an economic bubble, but in a really social bubble that we see among property agents in Malaysia.
Right.
Yeah.
So we tried to like look past this discrimination, right? Because like the fear has to come from somewhere. There is a very like strong fear embedded, and it could be because, you know, they've had experiences in the past with Indian people, and they have, you know, maybe lost a huge amount of rental income or even property damage that they have faced. And we tried to, you know, put some sincerity, kindness, hoping that if we solve the problem of like this loss of income, we can eventually overcome the racial discrimination if this is the root cause of racial discrimination. So that's what AOD has done together with SOCDEM.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's an optimistic view. That's very optimistic, right? I think generally, like based on the landlords we've spoken to, quite a number come from a place of like insecurity and vulnerability, right? Because we don't have the Residential Tenancy Act, and therefore the set of laws, it's really a patchwork right now that constitute what rights and landlords and tenants have. And so it's a very tenuous and vulnerable position. I think the optimistic, and perhaps if we solve this, then, you know, racial discrimination will decrease. But some of the landlords we've also spoken to are, you know, downright prejudiced, right? Individuals who either form their opinions based on news or based on word of mouth. And they think, you know, the line that I commonly hear is, "I'm not racist, I just have racial preferences." But in reality, that's one and the same thing, right? When we judge one individual based on the reputation of a whole group, that is definitionally racism.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying I support this, but let's just play the devil's advocate. Like, putting yourself in a landlord's shoes, for example. Do you think when it comes down to it, you know, you have this asset that you also want to protect, and to a certain extent, can we say that, you know, are they aware of this kind of harm that they cause when it comes to deciding who gets to be in their property? Or is it more like it's a personal preference, like it's my asset, I can decide who I want to stay in it, right? So where is the line, or how do we balance that if we put ourselves in a landlord perspective, right?
So from a landlord perspective, if the protection of the asset is the priority, that's why, so in Malaysia we have two kinds of tribunal. We have the strata tribunal, that means like in your condo management law, if you have a dispute, and, you know, because we're talking about we want to protect our asset, right? That means you're afraid that something's going to happen to it, and you're going to have a loss of income from it, and you're not going to be able to recover this income. Hiring a lawyer to go after your tenant might be too expensive, and you may end up spending on the lawyer much more than recovering any amount of property damage or property loss. So what we are trying to introduce the tribunal system is, it exists in Malaysia for two things, the Sexual Harassment Tribunal and the Strata Tribunal. The Strata Tribunal exists for like condo management and JMBs if they have a dispute with the tenants and the people who pay their maintenance fees of like who should spend the money where. You file in a case, it's 100 ringgit, it gets heard within a few months, nobody needs a lawyer. But the decision of the tribunal is a court order equivalent decision. And it's the same thing for the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. Right. This means you've lowered the barrier of legal access for people to dispute this loss of anything. The tribunal can order that if a tenant has caused damage to your property, then the tenant has to pay how much to, you know, relieve you of this thing. So if you have an avenue that you know you can go ahead to protect, the optimist in me is likely to think that you will be less racist because of it.
But I'm guessing as well, you know, landlords might not want to go through this tribunal and go through the hassle of it's easier to be racist, put it this way. It's easier to, you know, prevent rather than to cure it, right?
Yeah, I think for me, the argument that I think hasn't been really brought up is that at the point you're putting your private property on the market, it ceases to become just your property because you are creating a market, right? If you rent out your property, you can claim tax benefits from that because it counts as a business revenue, right? It's not like you can sell any form of food in Malaysia. There are standards, safety standards to be set, and any form of product, right? There is no true free market in Malaysia because we acknowledge that we have to protect the consumer as well. And so you can't just sell harmful substances saying that this is a personal one-on-one relationship, right? Because there are asymmetries of power, and where at the point at which individuals, renters, rely on this market to have housing, right? This is a fundamental need of life. It's not like it's not like I'm trying to buy a piece of clothing, you know, a fashion brand. It is a fundamental place where
it's shelter.
It's shelter, right? It informs everything. And so for you to say that this is my property, and you know the government shouldn't get involved. Well, the government already is involved in many ways, right? It's regulating whether or not you
have to get it stamped.
You have to get it stamped. You can't put out the number of rooms, certain number of rooms, right? And at the point of which you expect the government to come in when there are disputes, therefore the government is already supporting you in making sure that your rights are protected. So in many ways, at the point of which you have a market, there also needs to be equal amount of protections for consumers as well, which in this particular case are tenants and tenants of particularly vulnerable communities.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't see it the way you guys do. And I think that's the problem, right? That's the problem we're trying to address. We're trying to sort of lay out the facts and lay out the kind of solution that can be simple or rather that can be a bit direct, but it's a bit hard for people to get on, especially, you know, when profits are involved or when, you know, protecting your assets are involved. We want to get a bit deeper into some of the solutions and some of the legal protections, if there's any, and talk about, you know, the way forward. But let's go for a quick break first. Hello and welcome back to It's About Youth. I'm your host, Fanashe. Today we are talking about rental racial discrimination and other risks that are facing the rental community. Here with us is Jason and as well as Kusha to talk about this. Right, in the first half we talked about some of the common forms of racial discrimination faced by renters, especially among youth. And we talked about some of the root causes or factors that are causing it. Let's talk a bit about some of the solutions or available solutions here. Are there, you know, talking about now going to the renter side, are there any legal protections or safeguards when it comes to renters who are facing this kind of discrimination? Or are the people just okay with it, like, you know, to hell with it? Let's go, Sha.
So from my understanding of what the rental market now currently is, there are properties listed all over. There's Facebook, there's all kind of websites, Property Guru, iProperty. Some of them have, like, you know, you cannot be racially discriminative, but some of them don't. Some of them even let you pick out, like, you know, the racial preferences.
Right.
You can
I've seen that.
Yeah, so the property just says on the ad, Chinese, Chinese Muslim, or, you know, whatever that it says on the ad. And then, yeah, so the properties get listed, people reach out, and there's a willing buyer, willing seller situation. So you come up with an agreement, your tenant agrees with the agreement that you come up with, both of you. There's no like standard agreement or anything throughout the country. So as long as you both agree on
then
something, yeah, you sign, and then you have to get it stamped. So the only way it's regulated now is through the stamping of the tenancy agreement, which also many people don't. Jason, is your agreement stamped?
No. I don't have an agreement for 2 years.
What a way to call you out on national TV, but okay.
Yeah. No. I mean, just to answer your question, I think.
Okay, we said fun, right?
Yeah. The short answer is really no, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I think the stamping is just to ensure that contracts are recognized, valid,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes,
if it goes to court, then it goes to court. But some people argue the federal constitution has Article 8 for non-discrimination, but unfortunately that only applies to the government treating
Right.
you. In terms of what person to person, citizen to citizen, there simply is no discrimination protection at the moment. And that means that, there is no enforcement mechanism, there is no good data on this as well, simply because there is no law surrounding it. So it's a compounded problem, right? So racial discrimination in rental tenancies, it's also a larger problem of the really unregulated rental market as a whole. And just on the law bit, right? So in 2019, then Minister of KPKT, Zuraida, did float the Residential Tenancy Act as part of the National Housing Policy 2018 to 2025. It was a listed strategy, and this is all the way in 2019, where it also floated racial discrimination protections. The year is 2025, and we've seen it announced again. We're still studying it, drafting it from 2022, 2023, and now 2025. But we still just have not seen.
I'm tired just listening for this,
yeah, exactly. And as well, it is a bit concerning if the government does take out plans to even include the racial discrimination clause in the Residential Tenancy Act.
Right. But if we look at it, simply, right, why is it so difficult to sort of address this or to regulate this outlaw racial preference in rental community? Is there a legal loophole, or is it just a lack of enforcement, or is it something else? Like how if I'm being discriminated against, what avenue do I have, or how can I move forward? Do I just not stay? Do I just not find houses? How does it work?
So this is exactly the helpless situations that many people and many young people who don't have the capital to go after these kind of big landlords who discriminate against them. And that's why the proposal of the tribunal, where there's a very low entry fee, there's a fixed time, like you get your decision within a month and a half, and the tribunal will govern based on the act and based on the law, and the tribunal will make a decision case by case, because not every case is a discrimination case. Sometimes it's just maybe you've been a tenant for a year, the landlord now wants to kick you out because you never paid your rent on time, and then maybe you happen to be Indian, the landlord happened to be Chinese, but it's also not fair to him that your rent was not on time, he had to chase you for it, the emotional work behind, the investment behind procuring back what he expects to get from the property, it's also not fair to him, the loss of income. So when there's a situation where there's a party that will freely rule, with a low entry point and a low entry fee, makes it fairer for both people, both the landlord and the tenant, because it's so unfair to the landlord if he has a bad tenant, but it's also unfair to the tenant to never get a chance to show if they will be a good tenant or a bad tenant.
So I think that's the apple, right, where we are incentivizing, and then I think the stick is to ban it. But obviously we know that banning racial discrimination, even in the most developed countries, it doesn't work 100% of the time, right? And I don't think that's the argument at all. Like, there is going to be, more importantly, a deterrent for the people who are in power. Basically, one is landlords, and the other, I think, choke point here is agents. Most people that are facilitating this racism is really the agents. Sometimes we've heard stories that the landlords don't even have preferences.
Yes.
And that the agents are the one enacting it, right?
I have a friend who's actually an Indian landlord, and then the agent told the Indian landlord, don't worry, we'll find you a good Chinese tenant because they are good paymasters in the pay on time. The Indian landlord is like, what?
Right. They also know.
Yeah, so we also have to regulate practices like this. The agent should present all requests that are made to them and not block out requests at their level.
Yeah, so I think it's correct. It's both property agencies and agents. So I'm looking at all the property agencies watching this right now. I think websites are also important, right? As Kusha mentioned. So like Property Guru, they're actively campaigning against it, right? They have this Everyone Welcome campaign that's going on. But iBilik is actively facilitating it, right? If you go to iBilik right now, you click on search a room, you can actively list your room based on what races you're open to. And I think that really just sends a really bad norm to both agents and landlords alike. And
but it does warm my heart once in a while when we see like Everyone Welcome, then I'm like, let's do that, But yes, iBilik still very bad.
I mean, it's very normalized and people are okay with it. That's why people do it. That's how norm generates over time, right? People are okay with it, and just status quo, no harm done, right, for a lot of people.
It's more like the harm done is not recognized because, for example, like if I'm a student who's looking to, you know, study in KL with whatever course, and then I have a date to find my property, if I don't manage to find anywhere to stay, how will I come to study? Like, how will I do anything?
Right.
Like, even if I get a job opportunity, if I can't find a place to stay, then how will I go to the job and ever come out of that like, you know, lower income level? And rental is absolutely important, not just for the lower income, but even the middle class. Right. Owning a property is becoming much more expensive.
Right.
If I can draw a parallel, if you remember the case earlier this year of the jagung seller that didn't want to sell their corn to Indians, and the whole country was in an uproar, right? That there was blatant, clearly discrimination. So I think the public can recognize that that is wrong.
Yes.
Right. When you deny a service, a product to a particular group, we know that's wrong. But because when it comes to rental properties, that it's been so normalized that we don't see that as the same thing. You know, if you have the meme, right? What's the difference? It's actually the same picture when you are denying a particular group based on your stereotypes and prejudice because of them.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. Right. So if you look at steps to combat this, I understand you guys are part of the Fair Rental campaign. And there's also other risks as well that are facing the rental community. So talk to me a little bit about, you know, Fair Rental campaign and what it addresses other than racial discrimination. I understand the tribunal is also, I think, part of it as well. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about the solution. What steps can be taken to combat some of this risks that are facing rental community, especially among youths?
Yeah. So I think the other part, so mainly we've been discussing about the entry point and during the tenancy, right? So why the tribunals is really important. A lot of the claims now happen in small claims court. But the issue with that, it's mainly monetary in nature, it's compensation, right? But sometimes, and a lot of our friends and myself, the beef we have with with our landlords sometimes isn't monetary, right? It's you want your landlord to fix something, you want your landlord to you know, return your deposit, right? And these are things that sometimes are non-monetary in action. So that's why we need a specific tribunal. The other parts are about exit as well. We've also heard stories of youth being kicked out on a moment's notice. And that is simply against any form of international law and human rights practices, right? Where the right to housing means also having fair notice for eviction. That the landlord just cannot kick you out within a 2-week notice. It needs to be at least, in our opinion, 2 months.
So we also looked internationally, right? Because if we're proposing something, we want to see like how is the rest of the world dealing with it? Because it's not a Malaysian, it's not a Malaysian problem that we have a huge rental market that's unregulated. So I think New Zealand did it the best, and we can all actually Google it. I'm going to put a shout out instead of me yapping about it. But yeah, we can all search it up, the New Zealand Rental Tenancy Act, and it lays out a very good structural baseline of what our tenancy act could look like.
Right.
And I think also we looked at South Africa.
We did.
So I think compared for Malaysian market, right? Sure, most tenancies in Malaysia, especially in Klang Valley, are contracted. But then if you go to different like smaller cities, a lot of times tenancy doesn't even have a contract. It's just a word of mouth situation, right? So how do you make sure that your set of rules and clear guidelines also applies to informal relational contractual relationships in that case?
Right. So okay, so that was my next question actually, best practices. So we look up New Zealand after this, and probably we look at South Africa as well as a comparison, right? As opposed to what we're doing here in Malaysia.
It's not a Malaysian problem. It's actually something that's already happening around the world, and we can deal with it.
I mean, to me, it's simple, right? We are foreseeing a lot of people are going to rent because property prices are going up. In the meantime, you want to protect these people who are going to rent. So you need to have this kind of safeguards for this industry to sort of flourish and to sort of make it, right? Because we don't want our sisters or our brothers or our family members facing racial discrimination, for example, not being able to get houses in Klang Valley, for example, to rent while they're working. So yeah, I think it's simple, but it takes and a line from 2019 till now.
I mean, really, the national housing policy already outlines everything we said, right? It was conceived of during the first Pakatan Harapan administration, and it's such a shame, I think, that it was really comprehensive, right? We've seen improvements in affordable housing, to some degree. We've also seen the Urban Renewal Act coming up that's meant to revitalize certain areas. But where is the middle, people in your post-graduation to your young adult life where it's super critical, right? And I think we've also getting new studies that show that the economic livelihoods of people, say 23 to 30, this is the most important economic moment of your life because that determines how
you set up your life
in the future, right? And if we are really ignoring or neglecting this group, both of us are renting, then really I think you're doing a disservice to really understanding the holistic housing market.
Right. So last question would be, what would be your message? If you could speak directly to young Malaysians who are frustrated by this issue, and I'm sure there are a lot of them, what would you say to them to encourage them to push for this, to push for fair rental, to push for tribunal, to push for the end of racial discrimination?
Write to your MP.
Right, okay. Write
to your elected rep. It should be very easy. Google them, like Google whatever the place you're staying in. For example, if you're staying in Ampang Jaya, just Google Ampang Jaya elected reps and you should find their email. Parliament has everybody's emails on their website. Please write to them.
Yeah, I agree with Kusha that I think this is really a moment where an opportunity for youth to reach out to the MPs because most of us are renting, right?
Yeah.
So it's really a close to heart thing. I think additionally, beyond the MP, if you see a property agent, if you see a landlord racially discriminating, right? Report it. So this is my new line. I mean, the Unity Ministry has also opened Rakan, which is their platform and portal to collect data and cases of racial discrimination, which is really a positive step because the government also doesn't have data on discrimination as they're only now starting to collect it, which is a good step. But it also is up to us to really use that portal and to call out agencies and landlords who do this thing.
Write and report it.
Right. Write and report, and hopefully for those who receive the reports, do something about it. Right. Yeah. All right, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Jason and Kusha, for shedding light on this issue. It's I feel that this is an issue that is not talked about enough. So it's good that we have this time to actually address it and to come up with a solution or a way forward to deal with this. Thank you so much for your time. That's all from me. Thank you for watching.